He used to think love was the answer, that finding the right partner, solving every problem, sacrificing himself for us, was what made a man whole. But something shifted after 50. He no longer asks, "How can I keep her happy?" He starts asking, "What is she bringing to the peaceful life I've already built?" This isn't bitterness. This is clarity, hard-earned clarity. He's learned companionship can't come at the cost of peace. Freedom, authenticity, self-respect, these matter more than avoiding loneliness. And if you've ever felt that quiet shift, stay with me, because today, we'll explore why so many mature men now quietly, confidently choose to stay single. Not because they fear love, but because they finally understand what it costs. 1. Freedom and independence. After years, even decades of compromise, obligation, and shared calendars, many men over 50 have found unexpected joy in reclaiming their freedom. This isn't about rebellion, it's about release. He no longer needs to check in with anyone before booking a trip. He doesn't have to negotiate weekend plans. He simply wakes up and decides. But freedom is more than doing as he pleases. It's about autonomy, about feeling at ease in his own space, his schedule, his own company. No more deferring, no more accommodating, no more squeezing himself into expectations that don't fit who he is today. This isn't isolation, it's liberation. And when a man rediscovers passions he once put aside, motorcycling, gardening, hiking, photography, without needing approval, he learns that independence itself is deeply fulfilling. He takes joy in the simplicity of owning his time. He appreciates not having to explain his choices. He values mornings that unfold gently, without disruption. In solitude, he is not lost. In solitude, he is found. 2. Emotional baggage and burnout. Many older men aren't running from love. They're retreating from exhaustion. The emotional toll of failed marriages, painful breakups, betrayals, it adds up. It wears a man down in quiet, invisible ways. The older he gets, the less appealing emotional roller coasters feel. He's already endured the highs that thrilled him and the devastating lows that drained him. He's lived through long nights trying to repair what felt irreparably broken, the late-night arguments that left him depleted, the endless cycles of fixing and forgiving. So now, he values quiet predictability. Not because he's afraid to feel, but because he's tired of feeling too much, too often. He understands that emotional peace is as vital as physical health. It's not coldness, it's caution. It's the wisdom to know that while love can heal, it can also harm deeply. So he steps back gently, not with resentment but with respect for his limits. In the stillness of a life without emotional chaos, he can breathe freely again. 3. Financial considerations. After years, sometimes decades of building, sacrificing and saving, many older men feel an urgent need to protect what they've earned. They know what it's like to lose half of everything in a divorce. They remember the sting of financial vulnerability, the helplessness of watching a lifetime of work dissolve in courtrooms and settlements. It's not about being selfish. It's about finally being able to enjoy the fruits of hard work, without fear, without obligation. He wants to spend freely on what matters to him. Hobbies that bring joy, travel that enriches his soul, investments that secure his future. For him, financial control equals peace. He's tired of compromising spending decisions, tired of justifying every purchase, tired of wondering whether his resources will be honored or drained. Now, every dollar he saves, every plan he makes, reflects his freedom. His money no longer represents provision for others, it represents security for himself. And that peace of mind, it's worth far more than the risk of another entanglement that could undo it all. 4. Changing expectations of relationships. The landscape of relationships has changed dramatically, and many older men feel this shift deeply. They grew up in an era when roles were clearer, expectations more defined, but today, everything feels blurred. Dating apps, casual hookups, the constant demand for flexibility in values and communication styles for many men, it all feels foreign and exhausting. He doesn't dislike connection. He simply struggles to recognize the rules of engagement. One man puts it simply, he's not interested in apps, not interested in casual encounters, not interested in proving himself to people who scroll past his life story with a swipe. He's not bitter, he's just out of step with a culture that doesn't resonate anymore. So he steps back quietly, Not because he rejects love, but because he refuses to jump through hoops that feel hollow. In a world where dating feels like performance, he craves sincerity. And if that sincerity is rare, he's prepared to remain alone rather than exhaust himself trying to belong to a system that no longer fits who he is. 5. The joy of solitude. Solitude was once misunderstood even by him. In his younger years, solitude felt like absence. It felt like something to avoid or escape. But now, solitude feels like presence. His presence in his own life. Morning coffee in peace, afternoons reading without interruption, evenings free from negotiation. There's no one asking why he's quiet, no one needing explanations for his moods or his routines. He has discovered that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. It means being fully at ease with himself. Friends, hobbies, quiet walks, and personal passions all flourish without friction. His home reflects only his energy. His calendar respects only his preferences. This isn't isolation. This is autonomy, quiet, profound, fulfilling, and so he's no longer tempted by the idea that partnership is the only path to fulfillment. He knows deeply that a man at peace with himself has already arrived at something rare. 6. Fear of getting hurt again. Some wounds never fully heal, and he knows that. He's carried betrayal in his heart. He's endured the silent collapse of trust. He's felt the sharp edges of a broken promise. And while he's not bitter, he's cautious. Cautious because every new connection requires vulnerability. And vulnerability for him now feels like opening an old scar. He knows what it's like to trust deeply and lose profoundly. He's seen how even long-standing relationships can erode silently, until one day they collapse completely. So now he guards himself not with walls, but with wisdom. He doesn't rush into new beginnings. He doesn't romanticize second chances, not because he's closed off, but because he's careful. And sometimes, that carefulness means choosing solitude over exposure, peace over potential pain. He's not afraid of love, he's afraid of reopening wounds that cost too much to heal. So he pauses, steps back, and protects the peace he's worked so hard to reclaim. 7. Enjoying relationships on their own terms. For many older men, staying single doesn't mean turning their backs on relationships. It simply means redefining them quietly, carefully, on their own terms. He may still date, but he no longer feels pressure to marry or merge households. He may still share dinner, conversation, companionship, but without surrendering his independence. One man describes this best. He enjoys time with a close companion, yet they each keep their own homes, routines, and space. Neither asks the other to change, neither demands the other to compromise comfort for closeness. It's not commitment he avoids, it's entanglement. He's discovered that companionship can exist without obligation. Intimacy can thrive without entrapment. This balance suits him now. It allows him to experience warmth, connection, laughter, but also solitude when he needs it most. And so, relationships, if they happen differently. On his terms, with mutual respect for autonomy, and if such a balance isn't possible, he's perfectly content to walk alone. 8. Personal growth and self-discovery. After years of giving, providing, compromising, some older men realize they never really knew themselves. So when singleness arrives by choice or by circumstance, they see it as an opportunity, not a loss. This chapter becomes one of rediscovery. Who am I when no one else defines me? What brings me peace when no one else dictates my rhythm? He explores hobbies he once postponed, takes up painting, returns to reading, travels to places he once only dreamed of. He invests in health, fitness, learning not because anyone asks him to, but because it fulfills something deeply personal. For him, single life isn't selfish. It's self-discovery. It's a chance to become more whole for his own sake, not to prepare for someone else. And that quiet growth, that patient unfolding of selfhood, may be the greatest gift of solitude. 9. Changing priorities in later life. As men age, priorities shift naturally. Where romance and partnership once dominated focus, now other pursuits rise gently to the top. He may choose to mentor younger men, volunteer for causes that matter, pursue lifelong learning, or simply savor stillness without guilt. The urgency to find someone fades, replaced by the desire to cultivate meaning on his own terms. One man put it beautifully, After raising children, building a career, keeping a home, he realized that love isn't the only source of purpose. His fulfillment now comes from giving back, creating legacy, enjoying passions he set aside. And so relationships no longer sit at the center of his life, not because he rejects connection, but because he's discovered other wells from which to drink deeply. His life feels full not because of who he's with, but because of how he lives. 10. Health concerns and physical well-being. With age comes awareness. For many older men, health isn't just a side concern, it becomes a primary focus. Some have faced major wake-up calls, a heart attack, chronic conditions, fatigue that won't go away. And in those moments they realize their lifestyle must change. Being single offers freedom, not just freedom to travel or choose hobbies, but freedom to heal. Freedom to structure their days around wellness, to eat how they need, to move when they feel called, to rest without compromise. One man shared that after a health scare, he transformed his routine entirely, something he admitted would have been far harder if living with a partner who didn't share those habits. This isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation. He honors his body now on his own terms. In solitude, he crafts an environment that nourishes his physical and mental well-being without conflict, negotiation, or delay. 11. Avoiding the pressure to meet expectations. There's relief in stepping away from society's script. Many older men feel grateful to no longer face the implicit pressures that relationships sometimes carry. The expectation to remarry, to share homes again, to merge lives complete with blended family obligations and endless compromise. For those who've checked the boxes, marriage, children, how's the thought of re-entering that cycle can feel burdensome or simply unnecessary. One man put it simply, "I've done that chapter. Now I want to write my own story freely." So he lives free from timelines, free from pressures to meet someone else's hopes or needs. His life now unfolds on his terms, at his pace. Without external expectations, he finds a deep, quiet peace in directing his own path. 12. Peace of mind and mental well-being. After years of relationships, some rewarding, some draining, many older men come to realize that solitude itself can be healing. They've lived through the highs of passion and the lows of tension, arguments, misunderstandings. And somewhere along the way, they learn this truth. Drama-free living is precious. He wakes without dread, moves through his day without tension, falls asleep without unresolved conflict swirling in his mind. His emotional energy isn't spent decoding silences or navigating moods. It's conserved for the things that nurture him. Staying single for him is about protecting mental peace, not because he's closed off to connection, but because he knows what prolonged stress costs emotionally, physically, spiritually. His solitude isn't lonely. It's deliberate, calm, and deeply restorative. 13. Comfort with the familiar. As men age, many find a quiet comfort in the familiar, the routines they've crafted, the spaces they've made their own, the habits that bring them calm. There's a rhythm to living alone that feels stable, reassuring, safe. His morning coffee tastes better in silence. His evening walks feel gentler when taken at his pace. His home, his sanctuary, reflects only his energy. For him, the thought of adjusting to another's habits, moods, or preferences feels more like disruption than enrichment. He's settled, but not stuck. He simply values predictability over negotiation. This isn't about resisting love. It's about honoring the life he's built, a life that feels right, feels peaceful, exactly as it is. 14. Lack of desire to raise another family or start over. He's raised children. He's built a home. He's navigated the seasons of responsibility. And now, that chapter feels complete. The idea of starting over, of blending families, adjusting to young children, or stepping back into the day-to-day obligations of parenting feels exhausting. It's not that he rejects companionship. It's that he no longer seeks the intense demands that come with building a family from the ground up. His energy, at this stage, is for self-care, legacy, personal fulfillment. He values relationships that allow for space, autonomy, and simplicity, not complexity. And if such simplicity isn't possible, he's content to remain single, not out of fear, but out of deep respect for this quieter phase of life he's finally reached. 15. Cultural and social stigma reduction. Times have changed, and so has culture. There was a time when being a single older man came with judgment, side comments, or the assumption that something must be wrong. But today, that stigma has faded. Society increasingly accepts that a life well lived doesn't require partnership. He no longer feels the pressure to explain his singleness, no longer feels defined by his marital status. One man put it simply, "In my younger years, I felt judged for being single. Now, I feel free." This cultural shift gives him the freedom to own his life choices fully, without apology, without explanation. And that freedom, cultural and personal, allows him to live authentically, in peace, on his terms. 16. Freedom without expectations. At this stage of life, freedom isn't just about time or space, it's about the absence of expectation. He values waking up each day without feeling obligated to meet anyone else's demands or navigate anyone else's emotions. There's no pressure to impress, no pressure to provide constant reassurance, no pressure to fulfill unspoken needs. His solitude is quiet, uncomplicated, genuine. He cherishes this simplicity because he knows how complex relationships can become, even when love is present. It's not that he resists companionship, he simply resists the expectations that often come with it. He has reached a place where peace matters more than proving his worth, where freedom means the freedom to just be. And unless a relationship could honor that peace completely, he's content to remain single. 17. Fear of emotional vulnerability. The older he gets, the more he understands what vulnerability costs. He's opened himself before fully, deeply, only to experience betrayal, disappointment, loss. That pain leaves an imprint, not because he's bitter, but because he's cautious. He recognizes that to love again requires opening doors he's closed to protect his heart. But those doors are heavy now, and he's learned that some scars run deep. It's not that he can't feel, it's that he feels too much and has learned to guard himself carefully. His solitude isn't coldness. It's a shield, not against love, but against repeating old wounds. And so, unless someone earns his trust with patience, respect, and clarity, he'll stay in that protected space quietly, peacefully. 18. Some simply prefer buying alone. For some men, this isn't about loss or fear or protection. It's simply preference. He's discovered that he thrives in his own company, that life feels right, calm, clear, and complete when he walks alone. He enjoys his home, his hobbies, his quiet mornings. He doesn't feel incomplete without a partner. This isn't rebellion against culture or resignation to loneliness. It's alignment. A man who prefers solitude has learned that he can live fully without needing another person to complete the picture. His days are rich, his nights are restful, his soul is calm. And for him, that is enough. More than enough. So why are older men staying single? Not because they've failed, not because they fear love, but because they've learned what peace truly means. They've learned that freedom, clarity, and authenticity matter more than avoiding loneliness. Some still date on their terms. Others focus on purpose, growth, or health. But almost all share one thing in common: a deep understanding that a relationship must add to life, not subtract from it. If this resonates with you, leave a quiet comment below. I'm choosing peace and choosing me. Because at this stage of life, nothing matters more than honoring your own worth and protecting the peace you've worked so hard to build.